Modern Eater Network production. Hell yeah. Let's get this party hoppin'. No more milling around. Get ready to have a mash ton of fun. Here are your hosts, Andrew Moore and Jeff Tyler.
Hey everybody, it's Monday, it's 4 o'clock, we're in Studio Kitchen, Colorado, and that means that you are on Facebook watching Beercraft. I'm Andrew Moore with Intrepid Sojourner Beer Project, here with Jeff Tyler, Spice Trade Brewing, and we are back. It's been a couple weeks.
Yeah, we had a couple weeks off. We've just been on vacation. We haven't really been working at all.
That's true, yes, like Bali or something.
Yeah.
I heard you were there.
Yeah, I'm real tan. I'm not tan enough to be in Bali.
So we're back. We're going to talk about all things industry this week. I'm really excited. We have Jonathan Shikes, Colorado beer man, the Westward beer writer, with us today. And so we're going to pick his brain for, what did you say, 12 years you've been doing this for Westward?
Yeah, something like that. About 12 years writing beer stories.
Wow, that's a long time. Well, thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it. How did you get into specializing in beer writing? I'd imagine most people come up to you and they're like, wow, what a dream job. How do I do this? For all those listeners out there who are looking to follow in your footsteps, how do they do it?
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky to be able to write about beer. I've been a writer, a journalist, and an editor for about 25 years, and I'm born and raised in Denver. And when I moved back here after 5 years in California, I got a job at Westward as the managing editor, and we were looking to increase the online presence. Everybody wanted to write and start having posts and stories every day, and there was no one writing about beer. And I could see how the industry was developing here, and I also just loved drinking beer, so I decided that would be my beat.
Nice.
And and starting there, it just blew up.
Well, there's no lack of breweries to cover. I feel like it's always good to cover an industry where like it just keeps exponentially growing all the time versus something that's kind of dwindling away, right?
Yeah, as opposed to journalism, which is dwindling away, but beer has definitely exploded, and I happened to start writing about it right at the beginning, so it just took off. It was terrific.
Yeah. Well, and beer journalism feels, I mean, maybe this is just me or like us doing the show and getting a little bit more plugged in, but it seems like beer journalism is sort of taking off. Like we've talked to all these people like living in Stout Life and porch drinking and all these. And now I don't know how long they've been having these, but they have beer journalism conferences.
Yep.
We were just talking about somebody was coming back from a beer journalism conference in Montana.
Yep.
Is that a new thing, or is that just new to me? I
mean, there have been bloggers for a while, and people have been writing about beer for a while, but covering it on a regular basis, and a lot of the blogs, I'm assuming they get advertisers. I'm not sure exactly how they make that work. It might just be passion projects, but there are a ton of them now. There was very little when I started. There was a guy up in Fort Collins who was blogging on a regular basis. There was someone in Colorado Springs, and the Post and the News, well, the Rocky Mountain News, which is rest in peace, but it, they would cover beer periodically. Now there's a ton. I was at that beer journalism conference in Montana.
Nice.
Okay.
And yeah,
Nice.
It was fun.
So we talked to we were talking to Tristan Chan of Porch Drinking a couple weeks ago, and I asked him this question. I'm curious what your take on it too. Like as a journalist, as someone with like a formal journalist background, right? How do you view? I think nowadays it's easier than it ever was for anybody to have an audience, right? With social media, you can very easily present yourself and your thoughts online, no problem. There's little barrier to entry, but there's little like fact checking too, right? What is your view on that with how things have kind of exploded and sort of the differences between like a journalistic approach to covering something versus just kind of like a passion project approach?
Yeah, it's tough because any subject you want to be covered fairly, and you want it to be covered, especially if you work in that field, you want it to be covered from a good perspective and not just from someone's opinion. You want to know who's paying that person to write, that kind of thing. So it can be difficult. And I don't think it's just beer. I think there are bloggers and online sites for a wide variety of topics and subjects, and it's hard to know. I mean, even news is out there, and it's hard to know who to trust. So it's nice to be able to have a journalism background. It's nice to have spent time learning how to be a reporter and learning about ethics and learning what's fair and how to call both sides of a story. But I don't know that journalism has gone away in a lot of ways, and so it's hard. We're lucky to have so many people writing about it, but you never know what why they're writing about it. Most of the people I've met try really hard to be fair. They try to be ethical, but you never know.
Yeah. Yeah, because we're always kind of chatting about like how, I mean, there's so many things going on in the beer world, but like how do you choose what to cover? Is it kind of just like the fun, trendy stuff that everybody's interested in and everyone's kind of covering already? Or is there like, the cool underground stuff that no one's talking about? Like, how do you discern that? Because I feel like a lot of times with the passion projects, they're more plugged into sort of the higher level trends versus like the underground stuff that no one's really heard about yet.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I want to write stories that both have are consumable to a wider audience of people who are just interested in beer and maybe would be interested about a brewery opening in their neighborhood, about a style that they hadn't tried yet, about just something interesting going on. But you also want to write about a beer at a little bit like you said of a higher level for people who are really focused on it and who make it a hobby or make it their business. So I try to pick stories that can go both ways. Things that are interesting, trends that I see developing, and I try to get pretty deep into it sometimes, and other times I'll do a list of some sort that I think is more relevant for a wider audience. So a little bit of both.
Nice. And that brings up something we were talking about before the show. Part of the beer journal is the lists. Right?
Yeah.
What it's like? How do you? What's the criteria for getting on a list? And I mean, I guess part of what it feels like sometimes these like lists have gotten a little bit out of control, right? You'll see a list that's like, here's the 50 best foodie events for the month of October, and it's like, well, that's more days than there are in October, right? I can't go to 2 foodie events every single day.
Yeah.
So how do these lists get generated, and how should we use them?
I mean, they come from a wide variety of places. I think some of them are, we've got all these events. What do we do with them? When you're a newspaper, when you're a magazine or a blog, everybody wants to be in there. People want publicity. They want to get their word out there. They may not have a marketing budget, so they're not buying ads somewhere. So you get just this massive influx of people wanting their information, and you want to be able to get it out there to share it with a wider audience. So sometimes you come up with a way to do that. They may not be the best lists, but you get a lot of people in there. Other times, when I do beer lists, I try to be picky. I try to pick and choose the kind of lists I'm going to do so that I'm not just doing a list about everything all the time, because it kind of gets old after a while.
Right.
And lists are really subjective anyway.
Yeah, it seems like it's tough. We were talking about this before we came on. It's just like there's so much stuff going on all the time, right? Like if you're trying to make an event or have a special release, like how can you stand out? How can you be different? You're kind of talking about being selective on who you're gonna sort of highlight in a list or a story. But I feel, do you feel like after covering it for so many years, do you feel like we've hit this point where like there's like too much going on, or there's not enough differentiation with like what is going on?
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, I do a weekly beer calendar that has all the events that I see anyway, whether I see them on Facebook or whether I get an email or somebody sends something to me. But I don't put in yoga or craft things that are going on or trivia nights. Yeah, I can't do any of that. And a lot of that has to do with a brewery, the neighborhood where a brewery is, and people come in for those things. They like to meet there. They like to do that. But that stuff as a whole is just, there's a lot of noise. And it is tough to stand out. I think now as a brewery, you have to have some sort of theme, some sort of beer, make a beer that catches on. It's hard, to get a little bit of a more regional audience for your brewery.
What do you think the most like outstanding event is that you've been to or covered in the last year? Just like the one that like pops out as like this is the wildest thing, or just like the most unique?
Yeah, that's a good question. 3 things stand out, I guess, just right off the bat. I'd have to think a little bit longer, but right off the bat, the Wibby's event in Longmont, it was just very, very different. They had these massive kiddie pools, except for that they were the size of houses, that you could go in. There were thousands and thousands of those floaty Pink Flamingo beer things. They had, beach balls. It was insane. A steel drum band. I mean, it was really, really different than anything I've been to before, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. As someone who grew up like right near the beach in New York, like that's one thing that I do kind of miss, like that like beach party atmosphere, which like you really don't get out here because you get the mountains and like all that kind of stuff. But like it's pretty unique to do a beach party in a landlocked state.
Yeah, so that was a really cool one. The WeldWorks Invitational, I'm sure everybody beats the WeldWorks drum all the time, but it was really neat. It was great beers. There was not an overly crowded festival. It was fun to get out of town. You sort of had to go and spend the night up there. So that was a neat one. Just over this last weekend, I was at Suave Fest, which was the Latino-owned breweries, and that was really cool too. It was a very different feel to it. There's, craft beer, at least in Denver, when you go into a brewery, is very, very white, and that's just how it is when you go in. And this festival was not. It was very Latino, lots of people of color, lots of music and food, and it was refreshing and fun, and people were having a really good time. There was a lot of smiles and just a lot of fun, so it was nice.
That sounds great. I'm bummed that I missed that event because I heard about it and I just couldn't quite make it this weekend. But like, it is an issue in the craft beer industry, sort of diversity, from like splitting it out from like the general, I'm a white bearded man making beer, and everybody who comes is sort of in that same bucket. So I love that idea, and I'm excited to check out Racy's when they open. They're not officially open yet.
No, not yet. I think they'll be open. They are hoping to be open in a couple weeks. I think right around GABF. I don't know if they'll make it before that or not, but that's their goal.
Nice.
Yeah. I just wanted to take a minute and remind everybody who's watching us on Facebook, we are live. You can throw up a question for Jonathan, whether it's about beer journalism or events, or since we're talking about events, I feel like we need to talk about the mother of all beer events, which is about 2.5, 3 weeks away now.
Yeah,
and
Jonathan just mentioned it. Great American Beer Festival.
Great American Beer Festival.
GABF is right around the corner. It's like I feel like it's almost like when you're cramming for like a final and you're in college, it's like all this stuff leading up to like this major like event, and that's kind of what GABF feels like. It happens in Denver every year. People from all over the country come here. It's an amazingly huge beer festival. You can try beer from everywhere in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, I've been told it's the largest beer event outside of like Munich's Oktoberfest in the world. Yeah. I don't know if that's true.
We're going to call it true.
We're going to call it true for purposes of beer craft.
Purposes of the show, it's been deemed true. Fact checker.
True-ish.
That's Jay, our fact checker. Jay, does that pan out?
That sounds good to me.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Approved.
Huge big event. I mean, I feel like in a way it gets a lot of people into beer, right? They go for the first time, they're just sort of blown away by the size of it, the scale of it.
The sheer variety.
The sheer variety of the beers and the breweries from all over the country, and it's just kind of an overwhelming experience. So I don't know. You guys are going, I assume.
Yeah, we're going to be there. We were there last year. We're going to be there again this year. We have a booth
with your award-winning booth.
We're bringing back the award-winning booth.
Oh, that's right. That was a good one.
Yeah, we worked really hard on that last year, and it came out awesome. It really kind of embodied what we're going for as a brewery. And it's a little bit of a sneak peek for what our new tap room is going to look like when that opens up, hopefully early next year. We're teaming up with the Denver Botanic Gardens again this year to use a bunch of really cool flowers and different items from the gardens in the booth. So it's going to be live plants. It's going to be pretty sweet. But it's
serving Scarlet Giant.
We will be serving the Scarlet Giant. We entered the Scarlet Giant in the competition. We'll be bringing it with us to serve. So yeah, we'll be there, and you guys will be there too as Next Stop.
As Next Stop, yeah, we officially rebrand October 1st, so we'll be Next Stop Brew Co. at GABF. All of the same beers, the Basil IPA, the Turkish Coffee Stout that you're accustomed to, but rebranded as Next Stop. So we'll be there. This is our first year not in Meet the Brewer, which I'm a little bit bummed about. But we'll be there in the mountain region.
Yeah.
Next Stop Brew Co.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, when you go to GABF, there's a lot of different places that breweries can be. Typically, well, this year they brought it back, which I personally am happy they brought it back, but they're separating everything by region. So if you want to find somebody from the mountain region like us, you would go to the mountain region first, and then it's in alphabetical order. But if that particular brewery in that region happens to be in the Meet the Brewer section, then they won't be there. They'll be in this separate section where like all the brewers are, and you can hang out and like meet the owners, and it's super cool. So it always is a little bit confusing if you're looking for a specific brewery, sometimes trying to find them can be a bit of a challenge. I mean, it's the convention center is massive, so it can be a little tricky, but they have the regional systems back, which I like, because I like being able to go back to like the Northeast and like try all my Northeast breweries that I miss and see what everyone's making. But yeah, I mean, there's so much to see. Is there too much to see? Is there too much for one person to take in? Like, there's over 800 breweries, right? So
Yep.
you can't even really have it one ounce sample at each place. You get 1 ounce samples. It seems like not a lot, but it adds up.
It adds up fast, yeah.
And each brewery's pouring, 3, 4, or 5, sometimes more beers.
Right.
And if you're on an end cap or something,
Yeah.
So
800 ounces, probably too much for one person
Might be a little much,
to have.
Yeah.
yeah, divided by 16 is how many pints over 4 hours?
Yeah, not enough.
Yeah, you could try,
Yeah.
but it just wouldn't be a good idea.
Yeah. So how do you, I mean, this is always kind of a question that I get asked is like, how do you, or do you formulate a game plan? Like when you go into an event like this, right, is it best to just roam around and see what you find, or because there's so much, is it better to try to, I mean, a lot of media cover this event leading up to it and they'll say, hey, here are the beers that you need to check out. Mm-hmm. Do you do something like that where you try to like guide people towards special beers that are going to be poured?
So yeah, I mean, there's a couple different strategies you can take when you go in there. I think it's usually best to have your first 10 beers scripted out. You can map them, but you also have to realize that everything's going to fall apart probably by the time you get to your third beer, even if you have your first 10 scripted out.
We've all been there. We've all been there.
Yeah, because you can go on the Brewers Association or like the Great American Beer Festival website now, right, and look up, whatever brewery you want to see, and it'll tell you like what their beers are and what section they're in, and so you can sort of map it out.
And the app's pretty good. They have a GABF app, which is actually a really good way to kind of highlight things you want to try.
Yeah, and you can check your beers in on the app too. I think if you don't want to carry that book around, you can rate them and check in while you tried.
Yeah, you can. I mean, you can do that. Some people start. They like a one or two styles. Some people want to focus on a region. That's a good way to do it. And some people have a list of breweries maybe that they've heard about, and they try and hit those. That's usually what I try and do is hit the breweries that there's a beer that I've heard of, or there's a brewery that I've heard of that's supposed to be cool. So I try to get to those. There were years when I would try and go straight for a brewery like a Weldworks or a Russian River that I knew was going to have a massive line of 50 people if I didn't go to it, within the first 5 minutes.
Right.
So there's all those ways. My wife loves barrel-aged beers. She loves hazy IPAs. So when I go with her, we hit those. Those are the ones we seek out.
That can be kind of dangerous if you're going for all barrel-aged beers.
Oh, God, yeah.
You're real careful.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, how many years has GABF been around? It's been...
I think it's going into its
30-something years. Wow.
Yeah, 38th, I think. I want to say it's the 38th.
Let's check with Jay, our fact checker, while he's... but we'll continue this conversation.
Yeah.
38 years, though. That's a long time to be doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like they definitely have the system down now after doing it for so long. Just logistically managing that much at one time is tough, right? But I think there's a lot of great things about GABF that we just mentioned. You can try stuff you don't have access to. The results are in.
The year of our Lord, 1982.
1982.
Which is when GABF was founded.
Wow.
There you go.
Cool. And so,
Thanks,
yeah,
Google.
right around 38, I think. 37, 38 years.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things, that GABF is doing right. They've been around for 37, 38 years. They have a lot of breweries from all over the country. What do you think that they could be? I know you wrote an article about this a little, I think, last year before GABF as far as what they could do better. And I'd love to talk about that a little bit because I think, there's room for improvement with everything, and the craft beer landscape is changing so much. It's interesting to kind of look at how to make it better. But what are your thoughts on how to make GABF better?
Yeah, it's a tough one because it is such a massive and sort of unwieldy thing, and but it is. I think they've grown it, and I think the craft beer industry has grown so big that they've had to try and grow along with it. And I think at some point it gets overgrown, and I think that's a little bit where they are right now. I think there are too many. I think there might be too many breweries, there might be too many beers, and they might be from too few states. Colorado and California are the vast majority of what's there. There are other states that have really high numbers of breweries: Illinois, Texas, maybe Pennsylvania, and the Pacific Northwest that just have a ton. Whereas the Northeast, 2 years ago, I think there was only 17 breweries from the 6 New England states.
Yeah, and we talk about this a lot. Like, we're lucky because we're here in Colorado, but it's a fairly substantial cost and time investment to be a part of a festival. If you don't distribute in Colorado, it's tough to justify sending a lot of your people and all your product from the Northeast out to here if you're not even selling your stuff.
Yeah, so I think if they could come up with a way to encourage that somehow, and maybe what they need is what I wrote in my article was maybe they need some sort of sponsors who are looking to either grow an audience in those regions or have a particular fondness for those regions to help them come out here. Sponsors who would be interested in promoting that region of the country, maybe to people who are at the festival or in Colorado.
Yeah, so you're kind of saying, like, let's say Sam Adams, very successful still craft brewery in New England, right? Like, maybe they should sponsor it where they can help subsidize the cost for smaller breweries in New England to come out here, get the whole experience, get their beer in front of everyone, get it judged on the stage that everybody else gets to compete in. But sort of they can help subsidize that cost a little bit. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or even something like Shake Shack, which is known, which is such a, as far as I know, it's a New York thing. I'm sure it's in other states too, but being out here, I don't know that much about what states it's in. I mean, I know we have, 1 or 2 locations here now.
Yeah.
But, to have somebody like them help with that, and, I think maybe it helps cross-market. It helps build what they're doing, and then, it can help those breweries as well.
Yeah.
Do you worry that would sort of, the Brewers Association has had this huge, push for independence and, trying to keep big beer out. And if you got somebody like Shake Shack or Buffalo Wild Wings or something coming in as a big corporate sponsor, like, do we start to worry about some of the independence around the Great American Beer Festival?
Yeah, I think there are mixed feelings from a lot of people about that topic. The Brewers Association obviously loves independent craft breweries. That's what they're all about. They have effectively kicked out the big breweries. They haven't literally kicked them out, but they've created a situation where those breweries can't really participate as much as they would like to, and each of their smaller breweries can't participate as much as they would like to. So for some people, I think it's ironic that the Brewers Association would bring in Buffalo Wild Wings or Jameson or somebody like that, which are massive companies that are not independent, to be sponsors. But the problem is they already kicked out like Blue Moon and Coors and Miller, and those were the huge sponsors before. So they've had to trade out, I think, a little bit and get some big sponsors in. And I think from their perspective, at least they're not beer.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Brian. On some level, it's a different industry. Right. Buffalo Wild Wings isn't producing its own beer, and I would love to have baskets of buffalo wings while I was walking around.
Yeah, I remember smelling it and being like, I really want some. And then the line was like, I don't have time for that. I got so much stuff going on. I don't have time to wait in this line. Yep. I wish I had the time. But I guess the conflict of interest argument can kind of be dealt with when it's not a beer company. When you're using a liquor company or a restaurant, you don't have that conflict of interest. Like, do they have a seat at the table? Are they influencing the decisions of the Brewers Association?
Yeah, and Buffalo Wild Wings also does business with some of the craft breweries. I mean, they had a couple of collaboration beers, I think, last year with Sierra Nevada, New Belgium, and can't remember the third one. But so from their perspective, they're maybe trying to help trying to help craft beer get on tap at Buffalo Wild Wings, I guess.
Yeah. So do you think there should? Oh, Jay, we got a question from our.
I just wanted to shoot in here real
fact
quick.
Checker.
As fact checker, as brewery owners and participate, and you're participating in beer or GABF this year, right?
Yep.
Andrew, I forget. Yeah. As brewery owners and then participating brewery owners, how do you see that as far as, cutting out Coors and Miller because they are that big beer name, and then versus, but we'll let Jameson come in and Buffalo Wild Wings come in? Does that make you feel better as a brewery owner that the sponsor dollars are coming from that versus big beer?
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword, I think. I feel like you have to have money from somewhere, right? So I get the need for a sponsor. I would love to see how the financials work out, to be totally honest, because all the breweries are donating their product, they're donating their time. The judges, they have all volunteer judges that judge the beer. They have an all volunteer crew that pours the beer. I'm sure the liquor liability and the actual convention center is pretty expensive, but like all the it's a beer festival, and almost every aspect of labor and product is donated. So I'd be interested, just from like a curiosity point of view, to understand how the financials of that work out, because it seems something doesn't quite add up to me. That being said, assuming they actually need this sponsorship money, I don't know. It does seem a little disingenuous to the small independent. Like, those are the two key words in the Brewers Association motto: small and independent.
But it's primarily a fundraiser for the Brewers Association, right? Like, a lot of the ticket sales,
yeah.
from what I understand, it's primarily a fundraiser for the Brewers Association. So, if you take away the Buffalo Wild Wings and the Jamesons and the other sponsors that come in, right? I suppose the fear is that you're literally taking money out of the Brewers Association to do the important legislative work that it needs to do for small independent breweries over the next 12 months between GABFs.
Yeah,
That would be my guess. I mean, without knowing, and I don't have much more insight into their financials. My guess would be that it would be hard to break even, or they might break even without that sponsorship, just by ticket sales. But it's the sponsorships maybe that that help pay for other parts of their budget over the course of the year. And they're a very small organization as well. They have trouble keeping up with the number of breweries, I think, in the country.
Yeah, and that's the tricky thing. We've chatted about this before, but it almost seems like the Brewers Association has a great, their motto is great, what they're doing is great, but it seems like almost like we're at this point where there's so many different breweries of different sizes that maybe it makes sense to have different size trade organizations to sort of fight for the rights of businesses of different sizes, right? Because like breweries like, I'm trying to think of a very large scale brewery that's still, Sam Adams and Yuengling, they're technically the largest breweries in the...
Yeah, I think Yuengling's the largest at around 6 million barrels.
Yeah.
And then Sam Adams is like half that.
Yeah, at like 700 barrels. Like, my needs are a lot different than their needs. So I don't know. I think it's a great fundraiser, and I think like the Brewers Association, their Brewers Association does great stuff. But it's also like, what are they focusing on, and how can that money be focused a little bit better, perhaps?
Yeah, it's definitely a tough one. I think even with the guilds, even with state guilds, it's hard. In California, I think they have multiple. There's a San Diego Guild, there's an LA Brewers Guild. They have different size ones for different cities. If there was a Denver, there's a Colorado Brewers Guild. If there was a Denver Guild, the biggest brewery in it would be Great Divide, and they're only making 40,000 barrels a year. The majority of the members in that would be making under 1,500 barrels a year, I think. So for the Brewers Association, which is the nationwide trade group, yeah, it's a tough. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they try and make everyone happy, and for the most part, they don't. I think they have a hard time with that.
They'll never make everyone happy, I
right.
guess.
Well, it is unusual, I think, to see an industry with only one sort of national guild.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe some of that's just the youth of the beer industry, right? It's as a mature industry, it's only a couple of years old, if that, right? We've sort of come out of this Wild West period of emerging market, and now everything's sort of flattening out and coming more in line with a mature economic market. And it's unusual in that phase to have one guild that represents the entire industry nationwide.
Yeah. Well, I think the Colorado Brewers Guild does a good job of filling that gap for us, where they're focused on, for the most part, breweries that are a lot smaller.
But you mentioned something about GABF and thinking about events, so there was ticket sales. And I think some ink gets spilled every year over ticket sales and how fast ticket sales go. And is this the first year or the second year that there are still tickets available?
It's the second year.
Second year?
Yeah, they didn't sell out last year until the day of. They sold out 3 of the 4 sessions. I think Thursday may have been the last one to go. And this year they're still, I think they sold out Saturday afternoon and Friday. I think Saturday night and Thursday night, I think they still have tickets. So they had a few more tickets this year, a few thousand more tickets available. They changed their ticket provider last year. And, I think just like you said, the ink that was spilled about how quickly tickets were going, I think drove a lot of people away, while the events that are going on around town attract more people. So I think it's a combination of a lot of things.
Do you think there's some, we were talking about earlier about 800 breweries, 5,000 beers, is there some sort of consumer fatigue that's happening? Is this event, is this people's way of saying the event is too big and I'd rather go to the, Melvin Tap Takeover down the street?
Yeah, I think in some ways, I don't want to say that's all of it, but I think in some ways there are too many beer festivals and too many events in general. And for a lot of people, the Great American Beer Festival may not stand out to them necessarily in any way, or any more than some other beer festival, except for the fact that there are so many breweries there. But they can go to another beer festival for $35 or $40 or $25. So they're not gonna do this one. And there are festivals every single weekend of the year.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sure Jeff, as brewery owners and people who work a lot of festivals, I mean, we could go to half a dozen festivals every weekend over the summertime, and still probably not go to all of the festivals.
Yeah.
And I feel, I sort of feel like even at those sort of neighborhood level festivals where there's 50 breweries, and we're all in a particular Denver neighborhood or something, it's still hard to stand out, right? It's like, it's 5 hours of drinking. It's 4-ounce pours or 3-ounce pours or 8-ounce pours, and it's hard. How do you get people to remember you? And then they put you in a room with 800 breweries,
Right.
And it's just that problem multiplied exponentially.
Yeah, the Great Divide, for instance, last year they didn't even have they've had an anniversary party every year, and they had another one this year because it was a larger milestone for them. But they didn't even have their party last year because they just said, there's too many festivals, and so they canceled that one. Avery cut back the number of of little festivals they have. They have just one festival during the summer now.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, go ahead.
Just a quick aside, we got a question on Facebook from Aaron Spencer asking about the Brewers Association, if they're a for-profit or non-profit, and they're a non-profit trade organization for craft breweries throughout the U.S. So just wanted to answer that question.
Yeah. I think it gives rise to these beers that are sort of like 1-ounce beers, right? They're like, I've got this crazy beer that it's just fantastic for 1 ounce, but you wouldn't want 12 ounces of it or 16 ounces of it because it's got, 18 flowers and cookie dough and all kinds of stuff, whatever it's, and I'm not knocking adjunct beers. We all know the kind of beers I make. I'm just saying, like, I feel like it puts the focus on a particular kind of beer where you're like, this is a really great shot of beer.
Well, I feel like it's hard. I mean, it's hard to run a business selling shots of beer, first of all. But I feel like that's also why there's sort of this, maybe backlash or spring back to really sessionable lagers, like something that's just like a drinking beer, something you can have a bunch of, you don't get drunk, you don't have to think too much about it. But I wonder if part of this sort of festival beer fatigue is the opposite side of that coin is sort of the craft Pilsner revolution.
Jay here again. Let me tell you this, and from what I see as somebody that doesn't own a brewery or anything like that, is we do everything to death, right? In the
This is America.
US of A.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So craft beer catches on, right? And then so there's breweries popping up, and then there's brew festivals pop, and we just do it to death, right? And it's good and bad because when you do it to death, the ones that are doing things that are really good, and they can survive, right? And then it'll weed out everybody else. But there's also a lot of novelty into like the GABF versus somebody that cares about beer in any fashion at all. A lot of people go to GABF just because it's GABF and let's go get a little loaded, and make a story and an ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend, So
Having been there on Saturday night, I can agree with you that there are those types of people, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we talked a lot about GABF. I mean, it's a great event. You know, I think if you're watching and you haven't been, definitely go check it out. There's going to be a lot of great breweries there. It's a fun time for the industry folks. I always have a good time at it, and most of the people I know who go to it, they have a great time too. You know, I kind of want to switch gears a little bit maybe and talk about sort of how things are changing in the market. One of the things we talk about a little bit on the show a couple times is hard seltzer. And I have a very important question for you. Will there be hard seltzer at Great American Beer Festival?
There will not be hard seltzer at Great American Beer Festival.
Now we know.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I did a story on that last week, and the Brewers Association is asking not to have hard seltzer there. They want to be focused on beer. Beer is the product. They know that a lot of their members make hard seltzer, but they want it to be beer only. I'm guessing there will be a couple of breweries that bring some hard seltzer.
Yeah. Well, maybe the next thing is the Great American Hard Seltzer Fest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Isn't some
You guys can just say no.
Isn't some of the way they make the seltzers technically beer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But even like the technically beer seltzers, they're saying keep that in the brewery.
From what I understand, and there's probably brewers out there who know more about it than I do, but from what I understand, there are essentially two primary ways of making hard seltzer. And one of those ways qualifies it as a beer, and one of those ways qualifies it as a spirit. And so it's kind of in this weird place. We'll have to see if it becomes something maybe the Brewers Association has to address, because it sort of straddles these two industries depending on how you make it. So yes, if you make it the beer way, then it's technically beer according to the federal and state government. My understanding is it's not beer in every state. That Colorado is different in that way. Maybe like you can't make hard seltzer in every state as a brewery, I think.
Yeah, that part I'm not sure. You know, the beer and brewery laws in the states are they're still every state was allowed to make its own laws after Prohibition for the most part, and so they're all over the map. In Colorado, if you they are beers. White Claw is a beer. All those are classified as beers and everything. That's why so many breweries make them. There's only a very few distilled hard seltzers in Colorado, I think, right now.
Yeah. And that's more like a cocktail where it's like vodka plus water carbonated equals
I
seltzer.
would say probably the biggest thing holding distilleries back is the carbonation, right? They're just not set up for it, working under pressure.
Yeah, that could be,
Yeah, well, I mean, hard seltzer is a trend. Well, we're talking about trends. What other, we're drinking one of the trendiest beers that Spice Trade makes all year long.
Pretty trendy. It's delicious, too.
Our hashtag PSL, our pumpkin spice latte. I like it. I think it's a good version of a pumpkin beer. I mean, people love it. People love trends. We sell more of this beer than like any of our other seasonals. We sold like triple the amount in the first day it was released.
Until November 1st.
Yeah, well, that's
When it becomes disgusting.
Exactly, right. And so, like, whatever people say about it, they have certain opinions. Jay's got a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Jay's got an opinion. We're talking about pumpkin spice
I'm
beer.
sorry I'm talking so much.
No,
this
it's
is
fine.
more of a question is, can I have some of that beer? Because I know a woman who says that pumpkin beer, and it's a trend thing because she doesn't know anything about beer, right? But pumpkin beer, and boom, 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 she's all over it. I can have that one.
Yeah, have that one. Bring it to her. See what she thinks. It's
I
more
don't know
of
if that one can's going to get me where I need to go.
That's what we have with us right now.
Okay, all right.
You do what you got to do. But that's it's a coffee forward beer. So it's a pumpkin beer. It's brewed with real pumpkin. It's brewed with pumpkin spices at a couple different points in the process. It's brewed with coffee from Novo, and it's definitely got a lot of coffee aromatics, and then it's kind of got all those other flavors of the pumpkin sort of into it. But pumpkin beer is a very polarizing style of beer. Some people are like, oh, great, that means it's fall, and they love it. And I feel like most people in the industry have this disdain for pumpkin beer. And I mean, I guess I get it. It's a trend, but like it's not really a trend if it's been around for 10, 15 years and people still go nuts over it, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it's been around for longer than that too. I mean, Blue Moon was making pumpkin beer in the early '90s. They were making, I forget what their Pumpkin Moon, whatever it was called. And I went on a road trip to Nebraska one time, and they were out of it all over Colorado. And I stopped into a was a supermarket or a liquor store or something like that, and they had all these 6-packs of, and so I just bought them all and threw them into my trunk and brought them back with me.
Nice.
So it's been around for a while. I think, there's a lot of disdain for it. There's a lot of love for it. It's not cool to admit that you like it necessarily, unless you just don't care. It depends on who you're talking to, I guess. From my perspective, I like pumpkin beers. I don't care. I don't like them all. I think some of them are terrible. I love pumpkin spices. I love pumpkin pie, and I will drink pumpkin beers. Some years I drink a bunch. Some years I drink almost none. It just sort of depends on how I feel. Last year I drank only Marzens because that's another huge style that's really caught on, and that's a lager, and those are around quite a bit now too.
And they're only around in like a small chunk of the year too. I love Marzens and I love Oktoberfest season. Because that's when they're all around.
Yeah, I think that's one of the advantages we were talking about earlier of the beer market kind of slowing down, and a lot of breweries kind of finding themselves with tank space that they didn't expect to have, right? Because we were growing at 17%, and now we're growing at 2.5 or 3, and part of that result is we're getting more lagers. That's sort of helping to drive that
because
trend.
People have more
because
time
people have the space
to leave beer
and they have the time.
Yeah, lagers take twice or 3 times as long as an ale, depending on the style. So they require more investment in tank space.
Yeah. So I agree. I'm excited about the Oktoberfests that are all about to come out like in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're out. They're here.
Yeah.
They're out. They're out in full. At least the packaged versions. The smaller breweries, I think, are bringing them out as we head toward the actual Oktoberfest in Germany.
Yeah, we were talking to Bill and Ashley over at Bierstadt Lagerhaus, and they were saying that they were holding off on releasing their Marzen until actual Oktoberfest in Munich.
Which starts, I think, this Saturday,
Is
the
it
21st?
this Saturday?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
they have a big event too, I think.
5 days.
For Oktoberfest.
Bierstadt?
Bierstadt, yeah.
Yeah, and then they have the whole Rhino. They have a big they have an event, and then they have the this year they're having like a beer crawl where they are loading people up on buses and taking them to drink Marzens at like 5 different places around Denver. But then there's also the Rhino Oktoberfest, which takes place at Bierstadt. I think, which is, I guess, Saturday. Yeah.
That's gonna be a good time.
So plenty of Oktoberfest activities.
Yeah.
Festivities.
Yes.
Plenty of chances to drink Oktoberfest over the next 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, get it while it's here.
But I think it's interesting. I mean, you've been doing this longer than 90% of the breweries in Colorado have been open.
Yep.
Are you what are some trends? Were there things you were like, this is happening, oh, this is going to stick, and it's totally gone now? Or other things that surprised you? That were like, oh, this will never stick around.
Where's the crystal ball?
And now it's everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, one of my sort of favorite things to do at the beginning of the year is I write like my predictions for the upcoming year, because I'm almost, I get like 5 of them right, and then I get like 5 of them completely wrong, and I always love to see like which things I totally screwed up on at the end of the year. So, I mean, trendy beers are really come and go, and then sometimes they come back in. I mean, fruited wheat beers were a big deal in the 90s. And now we have fruited gozas, and it's not the same profile, because gozas are usually tart and they're lower in alcohol. But it is funny to see a wheat-based beer come back with all that fruit in it. People are always calling for the death of IPAs and how that's going to end someday, but IPAs just keep getting stronger. And now there's New England IPAs that are there's a whole segment of people who are drinking those who didn't like IPAs before that. So, I think that's interesting as well. The trendy beers, Brut IPAs did not last for very long. I think they're kind of heading out. There was only a couple, I think, that I enjoyed.
So you got to have some perspective here. Like, what's the secret? Why is it that we're all drinking hazy IPAs and we're not drinking Brut IPAs?
I mean, I think it's just what is easiest. Hazy IPAs are really easy to drink. They're soft, they're sweet, they're delicious. I think they appeal to a wider palate. It's like sours don't appeal to a huge number of people. They're very niche beer. So more people maybe like some kettle sours or Berliners or gozas that have some tartness. But sours only appeal to a slim number of people, and the Brut IPA profile, I think, just they're a little bit hard to drink. You sort of have to fight your way through them sometimes. And hazies are, you know, it's like
It's like orange juice.
yeah, it's like orange juice, you know, or milkshakes or whatever. I mean, they're things that everybody loves. So they taste, they're tropical. They taste great.
I feel like it's how can you get. I mean, there's a lot of beer styles, right, that have been around for a long time. And I feel like a lot of the new styles that seem to take off are like, how can you get somebody who's not traditionally a beer drinker to try a beer? And like, I feel like New England IPAs are good because, I mean, this happens to us all the time. I'll be at an event, I'll be pouring beer, and they'll be like, oh, do you, I don't like IPAs. I don't, or no, they're like, oh, I don't like hoppy beers. And I'm like, well, like, you know, there's bitterness from the hops. There's also hop aromatics and flavor. And maybe you would like this New England IPA, and 9 times out of 10, they're like, oh, this is awesome. So I feel like it's almost like how can craft beer be more inclusive of other palates instead of just being like, this is a traditional Marzen, and if you don't like it, you can go away. You know what I mean? Like, how can you bring more people in? And I think those new styles a lot of times can pick up on something that's missing in the beer world. Like, not everyone likes bitter stuff. Bitter is like you have to like train yourself to like bitter stuff, right? Bitter was like sort of a survival thing. If it tastes bitter, it's probably poisonous. And so it takes a while to kind of get used to that. So sweet things maybe more people can get used to easier.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think so. But we've got to be bringing in more palates all the time.
Yeah.
The sour is the same way. I was listening to a woman who does a lot of science behind flavor, and just bitter and sour. It's like something like 21 or 24 times you have to introduce those flavors into your body to sort of train yourself that this isn't gonna hurt me.
Right. Like black coffee. Like,
right.
You don't just love black coffee the first time you have it. You're like, why does anybody drink this?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like certain types of sours, like you mentioned earlier, Jonathan, is kind of bringing the wine drinker into the world of beer, when you can have some acidity and you can have some fruit profile that you would normally find in a wine, and if it's barrel aged, even closer to wine, or things like what Alex Liberati is doing with NO beers. You know, that's tastes very similar to wine. But yeah, I'll be interested to see what new trends happen next year. It's hard to predict.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was saying that I thought that hoppy kolsch's were going to be a thing this year because I saw like 3 of them, and then I haven't seen one since. I thought like mushroom beers were going to be a thing, and then I haven't seen any more.
I'm still rooting
beers.
for that one.
Yeah. We had a mushroom beer at Collab Fest. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Fungus IPA.
Fungus IPA. Oof.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe.
You usually see the mushrooms in like the saisons and the beer.
it was a Schwartz beer.
Yeah, something where the yeast is kind of complementary to the earthiness of the mushrooms. I feel like. I don't know about mushroom IPA.
Yeah, I don't know if that would go.
Sour fungus.
Sour
Keep
fungus.
them coming.
I'm just trying to,
Jay. We'll keep telling you no.
I'm just trying to do the names of what I would think they'd be as somebody that doesn't know anything, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like you got to name one fungus among us.
Well,
See, there we go.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to make the prediction that I think craft lagers are still gonna continue to expand. I think sessionable beers that you can have a couple of in a sitting are around to stay. I hope.
Yeah, that was definitely one of my predictions too. Every all the major breweries now have a beer. Almost all of them just call it a lager, which is a style. But part of me sort of wishes that they would classify them in some way because it's hard to know. I mean, some of them are maltier than others. Some are really floral based on their yeast profiles. They're really different. I would love to see more lagers, but more lagers with more, they don't necessarily have to be higher in alcohol, but just more flavorful lagers that bring more to the table. I mean, part of the reason I started drinking craft beer was because I just liked the taste of Sierra Nevada better than I liked the taste of Coors, and so drinking a lager to me just reminds me too much of drinking a Coors or a Bud, and so for me, I want something that has more, that just brings something more to the table.
There's a great brewery I used to go to in Massachusetts when I was living there called Jack's Abbey, and they do all lagers, but they don't just stick to different types of pilsners or they do an India Pale Lager. They'll do styles that you traditionally think of as ales, but they have sort of like the drinkability of a lager. And I love that because you get the flavor without kind of the filling aspect or over flavoring that you get in some ales.
There's some really good ones. There was some free advertising here. Is it Mountain Time? New Belgium's
I think that's what it's called.
lager
Yeah. Yep.
is really good.
So good. I haven't had a chance to have that one yet. I have one in my fridge, but I haven't.
And then the Post, their Mexican lager that was top rope,
Yep.
is phenomenal.
I haven't had that one either. I'll have to try it.
Yeah. So there. Yeah. I recommend those two.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are both great. I mean, Crooked Staves Pilsner is really good.
Von Pilsner, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I love True's Pilsner Cold. And I had a beer that was a collab between New Image and Mutual Friend the other day that was a great, like, floral. It was just a lager as well, but it just had some really, really nice. But I only found it just because I was trying a bunch of things. I just wasn't sure what it was going to be like. But yeah, there's some lovely ones out there.
Nice. Well,
so one of the other trends I feel like is coming to Colorado, and I don't know if you predicted this or not, but it is brew pubs. And I think I see more breweries all the time that are either opening with food or they're adding food to their existing models. And I'm excited about it. I mean, I know you love beer and food.
Yeah, I mean,
sort of
that's
more
our-
elevated
yeah.
beer and food.
that's our whole business model is really a brew pub.
Yeah, but I think there are breweries that are they're buying food trucks or they're opening restaurants across the street, and this is becoming a part of the experience, which I felt like is sort of the case everywhere else, right? Like you mentioned California earlier. I feel like you're hard pressed to find a brewery in California that doesn't also serve food. And when I originally came to Colorado and sort of getting into the beer market, I felt like there was this almost taboo, right? If you have food, then your beer's probably not very good, right? I don't know if that's was just people's experiences with beer and food in Colorado, or if it was just some, I don't know, beer connoisseurship gone awry.
Yeah, I think that was a holdout from the 90s, because in the 90s there were only two kinds of breweries in Colorado. There were brew pubs that had food, and there were packaging breweries. There were no tap rooms that just sold beer over the counter. That didn't start. I think Dry Dock was the very first brewery that didn't do either. That when they opened, they didn't have packaging and they didn't have food. They just had beer. They just gave you a pint. And so I think that the older breweries, when we got into this modern kind of brewery revolution here, or if that's probably the wrong word for it, but when we got into the modern times, those older breweries were still what people were thinking of, and maybe they were played out in their minds, or they were just old and they weren't doing the newest things. So I think that association with brew pubs, not having the greatest beer, it's still a little bit there to some degree, but it's changing, and even the model of the brew pubs is changing. With you've got the Counterculture hat on right now, and
yeah.
those guys
Kevin's
opened.
good for, yeah.
Yep, and then the Grateful Gnome, they're a sandwich place and a brewery. It's not like a brew pub. It's not like a sit down kind of place like a Wind Coop. So there's definitely, that's sort of been fun to see. Platt Park, open their little sandwich shop with a window into the brewery right next door to them. So yeah, that has been changing. So that'll be interesting, fun to watch.
I think those places are good insights, because I feel like a lot of times people don't necessarily want like a whole meal when they're having a couple beers, but like having something to eat might be
some
nice.
like warm pretzels and cheese sauce or something.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about your menu, you think about me. Warm pretzels and cheese sauce.
Well, I'm always thinking about
And a
that.
lager.
Yeah. More free advertising. Harpoon in Boston had a really, really good beer hall, and all they did was homemade hot pretzels and a bunch of different sauces. And it was great, because you could go there, have a couple beers. Like, if you're hungry, you get a pretzel, it tastes delicious, and then you go on with your night.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't have to be this complicated, huge menu with all this stuff going on.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm excited about that, because I have, we've had people come into the tap room and be like, where are all the brew pubs in this state?
Yeah.
Like, how do you get beer and food around here? And I think that's definitely changing.
Yeah, well, food trucks are really popular at breweries, obviously. But yeah, I was just in California a little while ago, and every single brewery I went to, they had a full kitchen, full menu, whatever you want while you were out there. I was like, this is nice. It's actually nice, because I don't have to be like, okay, where are we going next? Like, I can just stay here instead of worrying about, what if someone in my party needs food, even though I don't want food. So.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the place to come out that does just dumplings and beer.
Yeah.
I like it.
Well, it's a hard thing to pair. Probably dumplings are not the easiest thing to pair with beer, but just dumplings and beer. You can call it Slurp.
That's $1 million idea, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we could get Will over at Colorado Sake Company to add dumplings.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah,
like.
that's a good idea.
Jade Mountain.
Or Jade Mountain.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that'd
maybe
be
talk to
perfect.
Sean and see if we can get him to add some dumplings. That seems like a more natural pairing.
Yeah.
They have to change the name, though.
Right, yeah. To Slurp.
to Slurp.
Trademarked. Do
Yeah.
they send the royalties directly to you, or
Just a portion of them,
Just a
just a little off the top would be fine.
you're not too greedy? Just a
Yeah,
little bit.
just a little bit.
Yeah.
I think you'd get some very interesting Google pop-ups if you were headed down that direction.
Could be.
Yeah, you got to be careful.
Maybe there's a reason no one's
Make
done it.
sure you go to the right one.
So, yeah, Slurp Brewing Company. You got to put the whole thing in there.
Right.
So we're running out of time, but in the last couple minutes, I feel like I know we're a little early for your 2020 predictions. But what are some other things besides brew pubs that we ought to be looking forward to?
Let's break some news right here, September 2019. What's going to be the hottest trends? And we'll hold you to it. We'll bring you back in September 2020, and we'll see how well you did.
Yeah, thanks.
You don't have to do 10. Maybe just one. Other than like the Slurp dumpling house that might come up in the next year.
Right. Yeah. Boy, I do think that the business models are going to change a lot. I think we're going to see mergers, brewery mergers, and even of smaller breweries. The food. Just breweries trying to differentiate themselves in one way or another to stand out, to go into a niche, to change how they've been operating. I think that's going to continue to accelerate. As for styles, man, I don't know. I do think the lager thing is gonna keep going. I really hope the full flavored lager thing continues or takes off or happens. But this year, I thought that there would be much more of a kickback with West Coast IPAs. I thought that there would be a real pendulum swing, but it didn't really happen. I mean, there was some pushback, and there are people doing their yeah, man, now we're doing both, or we're doing a West Coast, and we didn't forget about you. Yeah. I don't know though. I don't know if that's going to fully come back to the degree it was at. And lower alcohol beers, but I think they just skipped right by lower alcohol beers, and now there's the sober curious non-alcoholic beers and the THC beers that have no alcohol and just THC.
Yeah.
So, but for next year, yeah, it's hard to even guess what kind of styles. I mean, Brute IPA I never would have come up with. So, maybe someone will do I don't know. Maybe some people will start adding adjuncts to Baltic Porter, something like that. We'll have.
I think that's going to be it. Yep. The 2020 style of the Baltic
Baltic Porter coming back.
Yep.
Yeah. And 120 IBU West Coast IPAs.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys, before you get out of here, can I ask one more question?
Of course.
Would you know why, for any reason, someone would add black pepper to a pint of Guinness? Have you ever
at the point of sale, cracking black pepper?
Well, it was a pepper shaker, but and I know this is off topic, but you're about to finish up anyway, so I figured I'd throw it in there. But you're talking about adjuncts, and he added. So he was an older gentleman, and he ordered a pint of Guinness, and he's like, "You have a pepper shaker?" And I said, "Yeah." And he went nuts with black pepper. And as brewers, and then Jonathan is somebody who knows way more about beer than I do. Is that something you've ever heard of, or you go like, "Oh, that's a Scottish thing, or it's an Irish thing, or something like that"? Have you ever heard that? And it looks like it's just no all the way around. It's like, okay, well, there's your question. You can go ahead and wrap up the show because there's nothing to talk about.
I've never heard of that before.
I want to try it now, though.
Yeah, I wonder if it's good. Maybe this guy's onto something.
Yeah, he might
be.
be.
The pepper beer. We brewed a beer with pepper, a bunch of different peppercorns once, but I've never
Well, I imagine pepper. It probably has some complementary flavors with some of the flavors that are in the darker malts.
Yeah.
Yeah, but pepper has to I feel like pepper's got to extract into a food. You know what I mean? You're gonna put pepper in a sauce. It's got to bake in. It's got to cook into it. Just hard chunks of crunchy pepper as you're trying to enjoy a beer. It seems odd. I'm not above trying it though.
Maybe it's like a Bloody Mary. You put it on the rim, and or it sits on top of the foam.
Black pepper rim. Oh my goodness.
You just sneeze every time you try to. Just imagine spilling my Guinness.
All right, that's your homework, is to drink a Guinness with black pepper and then get back to me.
Pepper in it. All right.
Tonight.
All right. Well, Jonathan, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, you bet.
As always, they can find you right on Facebook.
Yep.
Colorado Beer Man.
Yep. Or Twitter or Instagram.
Or they can follow Westward and find out everything that's going on in the Colorado beer scene. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
Yeah, thanks for following along on Facebook, and we'll see you again soon.